please keep them with you, or you can, if you have conversations or they need to play, you can go to the cafe area or the other areas, inshallah, outside of the musalla. So please don't have your conversations in the musalla during the program. Shaykh Umer is visiting us from California. He was previously in the C-suite, the C-level executive at SpaceX. In his 30s, he began a journey to not only memorize the Quran, not only complete a full alim program of 6 years, but also complete a Darul Ifta program where he became a mufti qualified to give fatwa. So not only has he pursued very ambitious career goals, but also very ambitious Islamic knowledge goals. So we're going to be learning from him, inshallah, in terms of how he was able to do that while also balancing 4 children and so on. So inshallah, we'll be learning about that today, inshallah. And then tomorrow, he has a program in his specialty, which is Islamic finance. So he'll be doing a program on Islamic finance and retirement planning tomorrow at MAP Seattle. At MAP Seattle, inshallah. And you can register, please register for that, because there is going to be lunch and they need to know how many people are coming. So please register for that. The registration is on our website. You can find it there, inshallah. Or you can talk to Brother Hidayat if you're not sure. Brother Hidayat, can you raise your hand? There you go. Brother Hidayat can help you register. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
lost child. Her name is Khadija. She's looking for her dad. She's right here, so okay, you go.
Assalamu alaikum. Please take a seat, inshallah, so we can begin. Our time is short and we have a lot to cover. So if we can please take a seat so we can begin, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. If you have conversations that you must have, please take them outside of the musalla. Barakallahu feekum. Bismillah, let's take a seat, inshallah. The program is live on Maps' YouTube. So if you want to send it out onto your groups, just let people know, hey, it's on Maps, Redmond, YouTube, so they can join in, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulullah. Thank you all for joining us this evening for a, inshallah, great conversation with Shaykh Umer Khan, who we have many mutual friends, many mutual people. I never got to meet him in person. I heard a lot about him, and when I finally got his number, I saved him in my phone as Umer Khan Space Mufti, because I know that he's part of SpaceX, and I know that he's also a Mufti. Okay, so thank you, Shaykh Umer, for visiting us. He used to come, he told me that he used to come actually once a month or so when he was working at SpaceX to the SpaceX building, and he Googled masjid, and he's like, oh, I-Core is literally right there. So he would go to the masjid, and then after 1 or 2 days go back to California. So we didn't get a chance to meet, but alhamdulillah, we're here now. And so I'll start with tea or coffee, Shaykh. What do you prefer?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. I grew up, my early years were in Pakistan.
Sisters, we got to do something. With a lot of noise coming up. Barakallahu feekum.
So we grew up drinking tea, and over time that evolved. There's now Karak Chai in Medina, and there's Adani Chai and all the new Yemeni places, but it's consistent.
All the new Yemeni places that we don't have.
You don't have?
In Seattle. We have one. We have one now.
In Southern California, we now have, I think, like 3.
But don't talk too much about that, sir.
Yeah, but I could never drink coffee. I can have the fufu drinks like frappuccino, latte, something like that, but not real coffee, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, barakallahu feek. And what's your favorite piece of fiction? Favorite piece of fiction?
Fiction. I think the last fiction I wrote was maybe more than 20 years ago.
I'm trying to make you human.
Yeah. So
it could be a book. It could be a.
Yeah. No, I've read. I think every book almost that Isaac Asimov has written. So
what?
Isaac Asimov.
Oh, Isaac Asimov.
So the Robot series, the Foundation series. It was science fiction, but what was appealing about it was that he addressed human psychology and sociology and human conflict and issues. So it wasn't just like technology, it was how humans operated within that. So quite fascinating.
Yeah. That's like hardcore sci-fi, from what I understand about Isaac Asimov.
Yeah. Sort of. Like I said, he brings a lot of psychology, sociology, and then the other one I enjoyed a lot is an author named Terry Pratchett. He's not very famous in the US, but in the UK, Terry Pratchett writes, it's a Discworld series about the planet, which is a disc on top of 4 elephants on top of a turtle that flies through space. And I know that sounds very odd, but the entire series is a parody. So sometimes he's making parody of physics, sometimes he's making parody of Hollywood, sometimes he's making parody of literature and Shakespeare, and it's a sci-fi fantasy series with parody throughout. So very entertaining. Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll kind of get into the main topic, I guess, and we'll talk about your career journey and then your kind of ilm journey. So can you tell us about your career journey, kind of beginning to where it is now, and how that was like?
Sure, subhanAllah. So my career journey, I don't think it's much of my own making. Obviously, Allah plans, and our parents make dua, and what happens, happens. And it started with, I started working at the age of 12. I was good with computers, and people needed help, so I would help them out. Eventually, I started consulting for companies. I used to live in Thailand at the time, helping companies with their needs, software and IT and things like that. So I started very, very early, which was good because it taught me the value of money and how to spend money, how to use money, how to earn money. So that's where it started. I decided after that I liked working with electronics and got into engineering. Got an internship. I think it's something I keep telling people who seek career advice is you must get an internship. You must get an internship. Everybody needs to get an internship. That's how you get a job. And so I got an internship, did that. Actually, before that, when I moved to the US for university, I worked in the cafeteria. Something else I recommend people is to get some sort of a service job. You know, it builds you as a person, helps you get to know people, helps you understand customer service, what businesses are all about. And so I got to work in the cafeteria, serving people food, cleaning up tables, and all of that.
So we have parents who sometimes say, you know, let's let my kid focus on school, don't get a job. And just focus on school and focus on doing school things, and then eventually you'll get a job. But don't do other things. So can you speak to that kind of mindset and I mean, we have other things in the program, but can you speak to that kind of mindset?
Sure. I think my perspective is the opposite of that, is that, you know, it's not all about the academics. And I don't think career success is all about the academics either. Nor is dunya success, nor is akhirah success. All of these successes come from some level of well-roundedness, right? You need to have the academic side. You need to learn how to work with people. You need to learn how a business works. You need to learn how to succeed in all these different ways. And so I will say the time that I spent, you know, even serving people food helped me later in understanding how to give good customer service. Because ultimately all of us work for either a corporation or we run our own business and we're serving a customer. And if we can understand how customers think and how to make them happy, that's going to apply throughout our lives, right? And so I'm a firm believer in, yes, go to school. School's very important. But at the same time, try and get some experience. Now, it doesn't have to be a job, right? So it could be clubs, it could be leadership experiences, it could be working for nonprofits, it could be, there's lots of ways, but there has to be something outside of school that's developing those skills early. It's too late by the time you finish school.
If you give me a second, is there something we can do with the kids in the back? Is there something? It's just a lot of noise. We have a mother's room, or father's. You can also take your kids, by the way. It's, you know, it's also a possibility. We have it streaming on YouTube. So if you want to help your wife out or something, just so that we can reduce the noise in the hall. Barakallahu feekum. Because we do want to show respect to the guests, and mashallah, we have a full masjid. So just for that purpose, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Continue, please. Sorry.
So so after working in the cafeteria for some time, I landed an internship. Alhamdulillah, it happened through a college career fair right on campus. And so I didn't have to search for a job. It just kind of came to me, alhamdulillah. And interned for 2 years, worked as in a help desk. And again, it was sort of a medial role, very junior, but I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, benefited a lot. And that turned into a full-time job. And from there, I did not have a career plan. I did not have a map. I wasn't trying to go from...
So how old are you now? This is out of college? So
this is out of college. I'm 20 some, or 21, something like that.
Okay.
starting a full-time job, and no plan to, this is the next step. If you look at my career, it looks very linear, logical, like it's step by step by step. If you look backwards at it, if you look forward, I had no idea what was going to happen. But I just know that it was something I wanted to do well in. I wanted to do well at my job, not necessarily career. I wanted to do well at my job. So had a lot of, and something I chose to do that I think was good was I chose something that was enjoyable, that I thought I was good at, that I enjoyed. And I liked to, this is where I like to study a lot, while I'm doing my job. In school, not so much. When I started my job, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder how this thing works. Technical jobs, so how do the bits and bytes move around, inside the computer? How do the packets move on a network? How does the software work? How does this work? So I really just love to study that stuff, and studied. And that somehow, and I like to understand what I was doing, and then what the person sitting next to me, and this person, and that person, this other person. So there was a lot of focus on understanding the whole system, the whole company, the whole technology, the whole stack. And I think that led me to then they're saying, hey, look, you seem to know this thing. We want to promote you to another level. And so they promoted me. And then my boss decides that he wants to move to another company. And he says, hey, can you come work for me over there? I'm like, yeah, I like you, sure. So I moved there. Right, and that I was at that company. And then the same thing happened. I'm like, okay, I start learning other things, and I get a promotion, and then another one, alhamdulillah. So every year and a half, I was getting a promotion. I wasn't looking for a promotion. I wasn't vying for a promotion. I used to get comfortable. I'm like, oh, now I understand this. Alhamdulillah, this is good. And then something uncomfortable happens. You get into a new role. And that continued until eventually I had done a lot of different technology things, and then they said, you know what, would you like to try out management? And I said, yeah, I think I'd like to try it out. I'm not sure it's for me, but give me a group that's very difficult to manage. Because if I can enjoy that and do a good job of that, then maybe this is for me. But if I don't do really good at it, then maybe I should stay in the technical track. So they gave me the most difficult group. 2 managers had been fired. The third one had to step down. And they gave me this team. I was like, oh no, this is very hard. I don't know if this is for me. But alhamdulillah.
Most people would do the opposite.
Most people do the opposite.
So give me the easiest team and then make it more difficult as you go.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to get it done with. Like, this is either for me or it's not for me, right? So alhamdulillah, that team did incredibly well. Like, I was able to turn the team around in like 6 months, and it became the top performing team. It went very well, alhamdulillah. And then from that point on, I was like, you know what, I need to develop leadership skills, soft skills. So my study changed from reading books about, bits and bytes, to reading books about emotional intelligence, books about communication, books about how to motivate people and get them excited about things, and so on. So it just shifted a little bit that way. And my, things that I was doing on the side, like certifications and degrees, evolved as well. So I decided to pursue an MBA. And again, more on the business side, learning the business, how it works, what's the biggest impact to the business. And alhamdulillah, that continued. So most of my career was really at 2 companies. It was 13 years at a company called Broadcom, which when I joined was less than 2,000 people. When I left was like 15,000 people. It grew a lot. And then secondly, at a company called SpaceX, working for Elon Musk, where I was for 9 years. There's a couple of years here and there elsewhere, but those 2 companies really defined the bulk of my career. And yeah, I mean, I think that, so I recently left SpaceX. I'm working at a company called Relativity Space. We're a startup. We're actually competing with SpaceX. We're working on making a rocket from scratch that we're going to launch in 2 years, inshallah. That's pretty much been how it was, yeah.
So tell me about the SpaceX part. So you were in the C-suite, and that's our title today, from the C-suite. So what does it take to get to that level? Like, what are the decisions you have to make? What are the things that if anyone else wanted to replicate that, is it replicable? Is it just good fortune? Is it right place, right time? And how much of it is like what you actually bring?
Yeah, so, we know the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, Inna Allah kataba al-ihsana ala kulli shay, right? That Allah has prescribed that we put excellence into everything. And I think that was a value that I've taken from the beginning. And it isn't about necessarily just doing everything that you're doing and everything you're asked to do that you do it well. You have to take it a level beyond that. And that was something I've always strived for, is that you're asked to do something, you don't just do it, you try and understand, why was I asked to do this in the first place? And so sometimes what you're asked to do and the way that you're asked to do it isn't the best way to get it done. And we know this, right? When we're being micromanaged, sometimes we're like, why are they telling us to do it this way? And so I tried to say, I've been asked to do this thing, but it has an ultimate purpose. Is that ultimate purpose even valid? Or should we try and eliminate that purpose and come up with another purpose? And if I was asked a particular way to do something, is there a better way to do it? And what I'm asked to do, is this even something we should be doing? And so this is something that I started applying, was basically, instead of, because early on I just put in a lot of hours. It was work hard. Then I realized it's more important than working hard is working smart, which doesn't just mean automating things or doing them faster, but it means prioritizing the right things. So what's actually the most important part of my job that I should be focused on? What's actually the most important thing that I can do for the business? And so in order to think like that, you have to understand, how does the business work? In order to think about a system, how does the system work, right? If you're responsible for a software portion of something that is a larger system, you need to understand how the hardware works overall. What's it trying to do? And I think that's something in any area of life that, and whether it's career or not career, if we can focus on what are all the things that we're doing and what are the most important things we could work on, and how can we take the unimportant ones and not just drop them, but make it so they are not necessary anymore?
It sounds like you're saying breadth over depth, or depth and breadth both. Some people, they just do one thing and they do it really well.
Yeah. You know, we live in a world where it's all about mastery. And so if you don't have depth, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to have depth. Everyone has to have some area of depth. And some of us might be blessed enough to have 2 or maybe even 3 areas of depth, right? But that's sort of where the limit ends, just because there's so much knowledge to be gained in any area. But in addition to the depth, having an understanding of what is that depth being applied to, which is the breadth or the system or whatever it is, that piece is very important. To know how you fit into the larger picture. You're a piece of a puzzle, what's the whole puzzle? Right? And so the breadth needs to be sufficient that the piece fits in as best as possible. That's what I'm saying. It's not breadth versus depth, but it's depth with an understanding of the breadth.
Barakallahu feek. And we'll have time, inshallah, for Q&A. We'll have time after we kind of finish the main sections. So now let's go from your career journey, which we got an overall picture of, and now to your ilm journey. So what motivated you? The notes that I have is, in your 30s you pursued Hifdh al-Quran, you memorized the Quran, and then you completed 2 different Alamiya programs, and then 1 Ifta course, so you became a qualified mufti. So what motivated you to pursue that? Some people, they pursue a little bit. They do the weekly class with Shaykh Jamal or myself. So what made you say, no, I want to do everything? And then maybe just go over exactly the journey itself.
Yeah, so I think if someone had asked me 20 years ago if I would be going on such a journey, I would not have imagined it. So this was not something that I had imagined or planned again. But there were maybe phases to how this happened. And so just kind of talk about my early life. Like I grew up in Thailand, going to an international school, not a lot of Muslims around me. It was fairly secular. Then went to university in Chicago, and again, it was fairly secular. And so for me, like I would pray, but I didn't have that much of an attachment to the deen. And so that's why it's hard to imagine coming from that to where I'm at right now. But again, there were phases. And so, for example, when I got married, my wife had come closer to the deen through her MSA, through her Muslim Student Association on campus. For me, the MSA was someone I couldn't connect to because I would go to the events and they would be like, brother, and I'd be like, I'm not your brother. Like, why are you saying this? So it was just a different type of, I don't know, for me it didn't connect. And so the first, let's call it like phase 0 of my journey, I just wasn't that close. My wife was more closer to the deen. She would try and say, hey, why don't we go study Arabic? And I'm like, why would we study Arabic? Like, English is fine. And so she would try to get me to listen to lectures, and I just wasn't that open. And then in a few years into it, 3 years into it, we decided to go for Hajj. And we go for Hajj, and I meet Shaykh Zahid Rashid. He's a scholar in New Jersey. And he's just I'm looking at this personality who's so committed, so dedicated, has such a zeal for the Sunnah. So he's giving us lectures on how to do Hajj, and he's like, we're going to do the most Sunnah Hajj possible. And he's like looking up the hadith and looking up the fiqh and opening up, he has all these books with him, he's searching through it, he's so dedicated, so committed that this Hajj is going to be an amazing Hajj. I was really excited and inspired. I'm like, yeah, okay, how should we do this and how should we do that? All these little details. And very, very motivating person who like really made us had an amazing Hajj. Answered our questions. And then he asked a couple of questions of me, and all of us really. And he said, asked some basic questions. Do you guys know the conditions of La ilaha illallah and things like that? I'm like, there's conditions? Like, La ilaha illallah is the most basic, don't you just like say it and like believe it? Like, so he's like, really, you don't know? And so it's like, oh my God, I don't know my religion. Like, how can I not know? I've studied all these other things. I talk about reading all these books. I'm a nerd. I'm reading all this technical stuff, business stuff, all of these things. Why have I not done anything here? So I come back to the US, I call him, I get a list of books, and I just like start going through all these books on religion, right? Everything in English I could find. Like, study this subject, study this book, this author, do this, do that. I'm like, okay, this is great. So I'm learning, like, in the first 6 weeks back, I think I've been through like 12 books already. And now I'm like, okay, I need to go to the masjid. I'm going to attend all the classes. So we encouraged the Imam. He used to have class twice a week. Now he's going to having classes 4 times a week. We're going to all the classes. And so one person who just asked me some basic questions about my religion motivated me to go learn the basics of the deen, what we call fard ayn, right? Fard ayn are the essentials that every Muslim is supposed to know. How do you pray? What are the rights of your spouse? When you're conducting a business transaction, is it halal or haram? The things that you have to know to conduct your life. Not to become a scholar, not to teach others, but just to live life as a good Muslim. Learning in English. And that continued for several years with al-Maghrib classes and masjid classes and this and that, and it just became part of life, and that's what it was. So that was phase 1, right? Phase 0 was like nothing. Phase 1 was learning the essentials of the religion. Then as I was working through my MBA, now those were 2 tough years when I did my MBA, because I was working 60 hours a week. I was doing a full-time MBA program. I had 2 kids already, and a 3rd one was born. And all of this is going on in parallel. And alhamdulillah, after 2 years, I finished that. And as I finished it, I realized the next week, I'm like, wow, I have so much free time. Like, this life has changed. What's going on? And then I'm like, wait a second. If I can spend that time to work 60 hours, get my MBA, focus on family, and do all of those things for the sake of dunya, why can't I do something like that for the akhirah? Like, I have free time now. I'm only working 60 hours a week and managing my family. So that's where I decided, you know what, I want to be on a journey of knowledge. I want to be a scholar because I want to be a teacher. That was my main passion. I want to teach people Islam and Islamic studies. And maybe there's other things I could do. There's some things that, other motivations, but my main thing was I want to teach.
So where did the idea of teaching come from? Is it because you felt like your life was changed through this teacher that asked you this few questions and taught you, so now you want to pay it forward or open people's eyes to what's out there?
That's a really good question. So one, it was the teachers that I found. That I was fortunate enough to have some really good teachers at the masjid, and this one teacher, Shaykh Zahid, who impressed me. Also, what I had realized was my career was benefited greatly by my mentors, who would sometimes just be like, they would just get up in front of a whiteboard and start teaching things. And I benefited so much from that, I wanted to do the same. And so even at work today, I will get up on a whiteboard and start teaching people things that I might know that they may not. And so I think that's where the motivation came from. It's like, I want to be a teacher. And then I realized, wow, that's a pretty long journey. It's a long journey, but it starts with, to be, as we know, there's a difference between your fard ayn and acquiring knowledge for your daily use, which everybody has to do, like you've got programs here. Or you want to be a scholar, and to be a scholar, you can't be a scholar without learning Arabic. And then studying in Arabic, right, as we know. So, and that part, for many people, it's a drag. It's a journey. It's long. It's not easy. So I decided at that point, okay, I'm going to learn Arabic and memorize Quran, which by themselves, they may not get you places, but then you can build on top of that. And so that's what I decided to do. And that was, I would say, like phase 2 of the journey, is memorizing Quran, learning Arabic, and then after that, pursuing an Alamiya degree, 6-year program, and then I thought that was the end of it. That was going to be the end of it. But
which 6-year program was the first one?
So I pursued both in parallel, actually, which I don't recommend anyone do, because the amount of sleep I was getting was well below bare minimum. The one that I did was from Canada. It's a Dars Nizami system. It's a program where you go through, and in the last year you do you study the 6 books of hadith cover to cover, and you cover the entire tafsir of the Quran. So that was one program that I did from Canada, and at the same time I pursued a second one, which is, so that's a style that's adopted in Deobandi institutions. So if you look at India, there's 2 popular systems. There's a Deobandi system, and then there's the Nadwi system. And the second Alamiya I got was from an organization called As-Salam Institute in the UK, which follows the Nadwi methodology. So it's interesting, why do you need 2 degrees? I tend to obsess about these things and want to learn everything. The Deobandi system takes you through all 6 books of hadith cover to cover. And it takes you from the Quran from the beginning to the end. So there's a lot of value, because you get exposed to a breadth, this whole breadth versus depth conversation. You get the breadth of all of that. You've touched every hadith. You've touched every verse. The Nadwa system, on the other hand, they say, no. We want to go deep, really, really deep. We're not going to cover Bukhari beginning to the end. We're going to go and study one hadith and spend 3 hours on it. And then we're going to get to the second hadith, and we're going to spend 3 hours on that. We may only get through a few chapters of the book, but now you've learned the methodology. Now you know how the author works, you know the style, you've learned it in so much depth with all the decoding and the tools that you have. Go study the rest on your own. So I wanted to benefit from the breadth and the depth. In the Nadwa system, they go through many more books, more critical, more deep. The Deobandi system, you go through fewer, but you cover them beginning to end. And so that's why I did both.
Barakallahu feek. And then you pursued the Darul Ifta, which is the Mufti qualification. So why do you need the Mufti qualification?
Why do you need one? Why do I need one, or why does anyone need one?
Why does anyone need one?
Why does anyone need one? Yeah. As you know, personally, people come with a lot of questions. So once people know you're a Shaykh, like if you just lead like Maghrib, you can't go home because 10 people are going to come ask questions after that. And you actually learn that as a part of an alim program. You learn that as a part of your degree. But if you really want to specialize, and I wanted to specialize and affect particularly the Islamic finance industry, but also in other areas, some other industries as well, I wanted to make a difference. And so I decided to pursue what's called Ifta, where you do 2 years of study. During that time, you also end up writing over 1,000 fatwas. So you're taking questions that are coming from the community, like real life questions that come in, and you decode the question because the questions can be very confusing, and then you write an answer, present evidences, present rationale, logic, what you're doing, and that's what a fatwa is. So you do 1,000 fatwas over those 2 years, as well as you're constantly getting, it's a type of apprenticeship, right? The way Ifta programs work is a mufti always studies from another mufti. And they look at your fatwa, they critique it, they guide you, they tell you this is what you're doing wrong, this is what you're doing well, and your fatwas improve over time, or at least that's the theory. And you do a lot of studying and one-on-one apprenticeship, and then after 2 years you finish, and somehow you're deemed qualified to answer these questions. Yeah.
All right, barakallahu feek. And then Then you sat on or now you are sitting on FCNA, which is the Fiqh Council of North America. So what is your kind of role on the Fiqh Council of North America, and how did that happen?
Yeah. How did it happen? I mean, I think how all things happen is through knowing people or people knowing you. And so there's a number of people on the Fiqh Council who I know, and I think somebody just said like, hey, would you mind joining the Fiqh Council? And I said, yeah, I think that would be a good cause. So for those that don't know, Fiqh Council of North America is the oldest fatwa organization that we have across the US and Canada. It was started as an initiative decades ago under ISNA, and then eventually they decided to separate it on its own. So it's a very reputable, renowned organization that's existed for a long time. I had, again, no plans to join a fatwa council, but I was writing enough fatwas and doing enough work in this regard. And then also, it's important to participate in these organizations to kind of help them solve problems for the Muslim community, right? And so the job of a mufti, so if you look at the technical definition, a mufti is someone who gives fatwa. Fatwa means a legal verdict. Someone comes, asks a technical question, says, hey, I did this thing, would it break my wudu or not? I'm doing this job, is it halal or haram? I deal with AI in this fashion, is this acceptable, is it not acceptable? What I was fortunate enough to learn from my teachers was, they said the role of a mufti, yes, technically might be to pass legal verdicts, but the role of a mufti is to solve people's problems. This is what Sufyan al-Thawri also said. He said, the role of a mufti, he said, anyone can call things haram. That's easy. Calling something haram is really easy. He said, the role of a mufti is to find a makhraj, a solution to people's problems. That's what they're supposed to do. And so that's really the role of the Fiqh Council of North America, is to evaluate the condition, the situation, the context, the place that we live in, because fiqh is an ever-evolving thing. Fiqh is not fixed. Fiqh is something that evolves. It's part of the definition of fiqh. Fiqh is human understanding of the religion, and it evolves over time as the conditions evolve. And so I'm the youngest person in the executive committee of the Fiqh Council. I don't think I belong there. My seniors are there, alhamdulillah, but we're able to work together and offer some solutions to the people, and that's great.
Barakallahu feek. And our own, as a masjid, our kind of interaction with the Fiqh Council of North America, primarily a few things. The first thing that comes to mind is the moon sighting, or the Eid Salah, we do based off the calculation of Fiqh Council of North America. And then also the LGBTQ fatwa, that was very helpful as well, that Dr. Yasser and then you guys all wrote. Yeah. I guess my next question is kind of moving into the advice section. If you were to look back at your younger self and give advice, what would you say? So to our young brothers here, young brothers and sisters that are here, what would you say to your younger self?
Yeah. I want to add a point to the previous question.
Sure.
That the point is about dua of parents. So I mentioned this to the young brothers earlier today. My mother was making dua that I memorize the Quran and that I become the Imam of the Muttaqis before I was born. In fact, before I was conceived. So she has been making this dua her whole life, right? And when I was, I didn't even know what Imam of Muttaqis even means. Like, what is this? But she would tell me, I make this dua. And then she would do the amal, right? She would take me when I was 5 years old, take me to the masjid, say, hey, memorize Quran. Didn't really work out. Tried again at 7, tried again at 13, tried again. Never worked out. I memorized 20, 30 pages and that was it. And so, maybe at some point, maybe she gave up. I don't know. Maybe she didn't give up, but she continued to make dua. And those duas, who knew at the age of 32 I would start memorizing Quran, right? And still the word Imam of Muttaqis it's a very high standard. But to be an Imam in the community is something that finally came true when I was nearly 40. And so I just want to acknowledge the fact that I'm like a living example for the parents who are making du'as for their kids of how powerful that is, right? And so I personally had no plan, and yet at the age of 32 I memorized Quran because I believe solely because my mother made dua for that before I was born. Okay, going back to the advice part, right? I think there's a few things that I am blessed and fortunate that happened that I would recommend people do. When they're picking career paths, I encourage people to pick a path that they're passionate about, that they enjoy. Because when you go to work, well, some of you don't go to work 5 days a week, but you will starting January, right? So when you're working at home or you're working, whatever it might be, you're spending 6, 8, 10 hours on that thing. Your business, your work, whatever it might be. And when you come home from that, even if you're working from home, and you have to deal with your wife, your husband, your children, your own personal goals, you don't want to come home stressed. You don't want to come home unhappy. You don't want to come home not having the energy to play with your kids or spend time with them. And so something that I was fortunate enough to be able to do was find a career in something I enjoyed. And I think that helped me be successful in the career, alhamdulillah, but it allowed me to pursue passions outside of that and give significant amounts of time to family, right? So that's something that I would highly advise people to do. But the one piece I would advise against, because my journey is my journey, and everyone else's journey is different. And so some of the things I did may not work for others, some of the things they do may work for them, etc. Something else that I advise is just start early. I met some brothers in Seattle earlier today, and they were sharing, they plan to do this in the future, and this other thing in the future, and this other thing in the future. And I gave them some very, very candid observations. Hopefully nobody was offended. I said, what do you mean about the future? Why not now? Like, there's two ways to look at this. Okay, Shaykh Umer, you started memorizing Quran at 32. You finished at 35. One way to look at it is, aha, it's doable. Okay, so for anyone who hasn't done this, it's doable. You can totally do it. You have Suhaim sitting right there. He just finished memorizing Quran, just finished IOK, and he works for Elon Musk at Twitter, So you can do it. I'm just telling him he can be up here teaching, right? You have people in your own community who are doing this. So definitely, if there's something that you've been meaning to do your whole life and you haven't started it, and it's something that's going to leave a legacy, not legacy for the people, but legacy for Allah, start it now. What are you waiting for? Start now. If you're young, right, also start it now. Start it now. Like as you get older, you have responsibilities. You have your spouse, your kids, work gets harder, physical fitness gets lower, energy levels go down. So everything's just going to get harder. Start it now. Start early. Start your career early. Start your passions early. Start your Quran memorization early. Whatever it is, do it early. I think that would be my biggest advice. And if you haven't started early, do it now anyway. But start early.
Barakallahu feek. Speaking of passion, kind of a follow-up to the passion kind of answer. Our community is like, if we look at the youth in the community, a vast majority are going into computer science. That's kind of what the community is about. So what would you say to a young person who doesn't want to pursue that, but then the parents want them to pursue that because they feel like that's the only way to succeed, or that's the main way that people here succeed?
Sorry, I'm not good with the microphone. That's interesting, just you go to other communities and it's different. Like, I want my kids to be doctors. It is like in families of doctors, all the kids are being pressured to become doctors. Is this for the parents or the kids?
It's for both.
They're
all here.
Okay. It goes back to you will enjoy your life more. And when I say enjoy, just to be clear, life is not about enjoyment, right? We have an end goal in mind. And the end goal is akhirah. As Muslims, our end goal is akhirah. But you want to try and remove as many of the obstacles as you can. Work is something that most of us have to do because we need the money, right? We need to support our families, It's a means to an end. But just because it's a means to an end doesn't mean we shouldn't excel at it. We're living in a country, we're living in a society where people are watching us. If they know you're Muslim, they're watching you. How do Muslims behave? That da'wah is much more powerful than flyers and pamphlets that we might pass out, right? And so we have to be role models. So it's important that we treat our jobs not just as a means, but we try and benefit others through it. We try and get da'wah done through it. We try and grow through it. We try and have a good time and learn through it, and then take that back to outside of careers as well, right? So if we're going to pursue a career that we don't have a passion for, that's just not a good recipe, right? We might get the money out of it, but you may not be happy. So what's the point? It's going to affect the rest of your life. So my advice to both the children and the parents is, do what you have passion for. Now, there's limits to that, right? If your passion is for East African musical studies, okay, and that's what you want to major in, maybe you'll have a hard time finding a job. So you should try and find something, at least that you can find a job in, right? So it could be accounting, it could be dentistry, it could be software, it could be doctor, it could be, it could be lawyer, any profession. It could be journalism, it could be media. There's so many careers out there that Muslims need to be in, and it's so sad that we're not in those professions. Alhamdulillah, that situation is improving. We do have media in more occupations, but yeah, I think it's important that people work in areas that they're passionate about, and that will help them in the rest of their lives.
Another argument I heard is no one is born passionate about the intricacies of a hardware chip. But once you learn about it and you study it and you become an expert in it and people come to you for advice on that, then you will be, and you're paid well to do it, then you will be passionate about it.
That's a fair point, because when you're in high school, you don't know what you want to do many times, right? And so if someone said, hey, do you want to work with chips? I'm like, I don't know. I thought I was doing electrical and computer engineering because as a 6-year-old, I would open up all the electronics and look inside and see what's going on. I later found out that's not what engineering is about. So that didn't quite work out. But I did develop an appreciation for hardware and software. So the way to find that out is you have to try. My second daughter, so my eldest, he knows what he wants to do. It's working with computers. My daughter, she can't figure out what she wants to do. It's been rough. She's a junior in high school, but we're just, hey, what might you be interested in? This, no. This, no. This, no. Everything's a no. Finally, we somehow nursing is nursing I can think about. So we finally tickled a thought in her head. So what is she doing now? She's going and shadowing nurses, right? Because that's the way you find out. You go, she's spending, she just spent last week, she went for a day and said, okay, what is it like to be a nurse? Is this interesting? Is it passionate for me? And so, yeah, I think it's a fair point that you may not know what excites you, but you have to try different elements of that. Find people who do that, ask them what they do all day. What you think they do might be different than what they actually do, then go shadow them and practice and see if it interests you, and I think that's how you find out what your passion is. A lot of people, it takes a few tries. A lot of professions out there, so gotta experiment.
Barakallahu feek. Another question that comes up, especially now, a lot of the young people graduating, they're having you mentioned about internships, they're having difficulty getting internships, they're having difficulty getting their foot in the door. Or many people have been laid off with all the layoffs that have been gone on. So what is your advice? I mean, you've gone through 2000, 2008, right? You've gone through these downturns. So what advice would you give to those going through these tough times or having these career setbacks?
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning of, if you have a job, be really good at it by finding out the most important aspects of the job you should be good at and improving upon those, right? So if you are really good at your job, then the chances of being laid off, for example, are going to be less. Sometimes they just downsize the whole division, they need to cut anyway. It's going to happen. It's up to Allah. But you need to take some preventative measures if you can. Be really good at what you do. Honestly, I encourage, I'm trying to encourage my own kids and others to say, if you can, start your own business. If you can. I realize this is not something I've done personally, so I can't speak from experience, but there's a few things that are changing that further just lends itself to this idea of, people are feeling at work or on social media, if they work for another company, they can't speak freely, for example, about Gaza. And I felt this myself. And at some point, I just said, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to tweet what I'm going to tweet. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I don't care. If they want to fire me, they can fire me. Like, at some point, I just said, forget it. The injustice is too much. But it's just not a good position to be in. And I'm noticing that the people who run their own businesses have ultimate freedom. They can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. So, number one, I do think as Muslims, we're spending so much time working for other people and other companies. So if I look at the crowd here, right, a lot of people work at Amazon, Microsoft, other companies, and a large chunk of the compensation is coming from equity because the companies are doing well. Well, what if you had your own equity in your own company, right? It's a superior way to actually increase wealth for the Muslims. Also, business honestly builds more tawakkul. You're not getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. You're like, oh man, where's the next customer going to come from? A lot more dua, a lot more just relying upon Allah. I'm relying upon you. I have no one else. So I do think it's a fair option for those that are entrepreneurially inclined or could be to give that a shot. I really think that's a good opportunity. And then as far as seeking jobs and so on, if you have gotten laid off, again, if you've gotten laid off, it's a good opportunity to try business. In fact, I've made a promise to myself, if I ever get fired or laid off from my job, I'm going to start my own business, inshallah, whether it's successful or not. So I've made that promise to myself. I'm just too lazy to leave my job, unfortunately. So
too lazy. After everything we've heard.
Yeah, going back to passions, we're making a rocket, and making rockets is really fun. And this thing's supposed to launch in 2 years, inshallah, and we're making everything from scratch, and so I'm having a blast. So it's very hard to leave when you're having
pun intended? You're having a blast.
Yeah, so it's hard to leave a job where you're having so much fun, right? Alhamdulillah. So it's hard for me to do that, but people should try and do that. And then the standard advice of build your networks, make your dua, do the best that you can to persist and realize that if you're going through such a situation, it's a test from Allah for sure, right? It's a test, and so those are the times when we have to remember Allah more than even what we do on average. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Speaking of entrepreneurship, I have an ask of you. A couple months ago, we had our hackathon, and we're going to, inshallah, have another one in February, maybe before Ramadan or after Ramadan. So if we wanted to pitch these hackathon ideas that the community comes up with to investors, would you be willing to come down and help the young brothers out?
Absolutely. So
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah. Maybe you don't know this, but I'm a part of a seed stage venture fund, and so I don't usually like to mention that. People immediately start coming asking for money for their businesses. But for a good cause like that one, we're always interested in good causes, in people that are trying to disrupt traditional industries. So there's a lot of enterprise software and consumer software and these things. There's industries that we've seen in the last decade or so getting disrupted, right? We saw electric cars come in, now we're seeing self-driving, AI has kicked in recently, but it's unclear which industries. But if you look at transportation, you look at energy, a lot of these industries are getting disrupted. And so we love investing in companies, and happy to participate in any way, inshallah.
All right, Abdul Aziz, you ready? He's the leader of the hackathon, Abdul Aziz. All right, good. The next question I had, and we'll I just have two more, kind of about parenting. So can you speak about your parenting journey, and then how do you balance your career kind of goals that you had and all the time you were spending there, and then the Alamiya program that you were pursuing, Islamic knowledge? How did you balance that with your responsibilities as a husband, as a father, as a son, as a brother?
Yeah. So I think to pursue extracurriculars like I did, you need spousal support. And alhamdulillah that I've been blessed with a wife who's always supported me, encouraged me. And then we talked through, we sit down and we do annual goal planning and work through these things and support each other. And so without that, I could not have done what I've done. I would not be here. I would not literally be here sitting in this masjid if she's not supporting me right now. So I think having an understanding spouse and working with them on goals and understanding and all of that is extremely important. But let's just start with the basics of our priorities, whether it's guided from an ethics standpoint or guided from an Islamic standpoint. By the way, Islam and ethics are, for me, synonyms. When people say Islamic finance, they say, yeah, it's the same as ethical finance, right? And so from an ethical standpoint and from an Islamic standpoint, it's fard ayn, it is obligatory upon us to support our families and take care of our families. Pursuing knowledge or nonprofits or activism or anything else or careers, those are optional things, right? So that's the perspective that I come from. And so things that could never be compromised. So as you're trying to combine a career and all these other things I was trying to do, you're always trying to be more productive. So I'm always trying to identify, like I've identified, I can only focus on 4 things at one time in my life. More than that, and I can't. It just doesn't work for me. So for me, for example, it was at one point, it was family, work, Quran, and Arabic. So everything else had to go.
What's everything?
No socialization. I mean, obviously no TV, no video games, no nothing, no movies, but like no, it was, people thought.
What's no socialization? Like,
literally
you didn't go
nothing.
to your sister's wedding?
I went to my sister's wedding.
Okay.
She got married.
I don't
before
actually
this.
know.
Yeah, but like, hey, the guys are having a get together. Yeah, sorry, I can't. Why? Because I've decided I really want to memorize Quran in a certain amount of time. So we went like really, my wife and I were memorizing together actually. And we became, for many people that would be an extreme. And it's like, what kind of extreme thing are you doing? It's like, yeah, but I understand it's temporary. It's a temporary extreme and it's a goal I really, really want to pursue. And so we cut out things. So you have to cut out a lot of things, free up time, find your areas of focus. Then you have to find the things that, what do you have to work on? Going back to prioritization, right? Like what are the things I have to work on? So nightly planning to make sure like tomorrow I'm going to do exactly this. I think Brian Tracy says, if you plan for 10 minutes in the night, it saves you 100 minutes the next day, right? Because that's almost 2 hours. How much time do we actually have anyway? We spend 8 hours at work, 8 hours sleeping or something. You have few hours remaining. So if you can free up 2 hours, free up 2 hours. So eliminate things, prioritize things, try and become more efficient. I was like researching sleep cycles and naps and how to optimize and how to bring more barakah into my life by having good intentions and all of those things. But the thing that could never be compromised was time with family. So dinner every single night, no matter what. Sit down as a family, we're going to have dinner, we're going to have beneficial conversations. We're going to pick a hadith, we're going to pick a topic, we're going to talk about what's going on in your life, my life, her life, his life, and we're going to have conversations. We have a guest coming over, we're going to talk about the importance of having guests. As Rasulullah says, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir falyukrim dayfahu." Honor your guests. So we're going to talk about the hadith. The guests are a gift from Allah. So those were the dinner conversations. Then some homework, some working on Quran with them, etc. Before they go to bed, I would do an Ask Me Anything session. Every night you could ask me, the kids can ask me anything they want. Those were really fun. Sometimes it would be like, Baba, how does paper get made from trees? And I'm like,
That's a long answer.
I don't know, but I'm going to Google it and look it up and answer it for you. And sometimes I was like, Baba, when you go to work and you do this, how does that work? So every night it would be a different session. So those things, the dinner, the Ask Me Anything, Saturday being a family day, Saturday's family day. So that's when we go out for dinner together, we go for a hike together. Again, you can combine your outdoors, your physical fitness, time in nature, and family all together, right? So there's things that were not compromisable and that everything else had to revolve around that. So I might take the entire day Sunday studying, but Saturday had to be family. And the same thing goes with the spouse. Like if you don't spend time with your wife or your husband, your relationship will drift. That is the default. And so my wife and I had a goal of spending at least 30 minutes together every night. Often that would become an hour or something like that. We're like, okay, we need to scale this back. But 30 minutes together, and we looked forward to that. We still look forward to that. And I think that's how you build a relationships. Is a lot of times people think like it takes a lot of time. It's like, no, it doesn't take time. It just takes quality time. And so when you sit at the dinner table, the phone has to be somewhere else, right? It wasn't like, oh yeah, sorry, I have this text message coming I need to respond to. So the quality time aspect, I would say I would emphasize the quality. I think quality time with the family, daily, weekly, and that cannot be compromised. Everything else was around that.
All right, Barakallahu Feek. And my last question, and then I'd like to open it up to the audience questions, is where do you think we need more scholars today?
I think we need scholars in every field. We do things a little bit differently now than we did in the past. In the past, the scholars now scholars operate full-time as like imams and so on, but that's not how the scholars of the past worked. The scholars of the past had their own, oftentimes they would have their own like business, they would make their own money and things like that, and then they would focus on scholarship. But they were living in the real world. They weren't like just imams, and I'm not saying that people who are just imams are not living in the real world, but like oftentimes imams can get disconnected from the community if they're not connected enough to the community by not engaging in the real world. And so I think we need to kind of go back and say, hey, particularly if you don't do it the way I did it and try and squeeze it into your like 30s, but you try and do it early on, you can get a secular education and pursue scholarship in parallel. And then you could be a combined secular scholar, and that way we can progress faster in areas like whether it's AI, right? Like we're finding ourselves writing a ton of fatwas on AI right now, like a whole bunch of them. And it's like, okay, well, to understand that, how many people really understand how LLMs work? And that just makes it harder. So if you imagine you are in that field and you've got scholarship. So whether it's AI, whether it's medicine, there's a lot of medicinal issues, a lot of health-related issues that the scholars don't know the end. We're always going to doctors to ask questions so we can combine our knowledge together, right? So whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's AI, whatever the field might be, psychology, so much work going on in psychology right now related to the deen. I think scholars are needed in every field. And so rather than scholarship being only for those that are looking for a full-time profession in that field of scholarship, by being an imam or a researcher or something, I think a lot more people should pursue part-time scholarship. Now, let me caveat that and say, I'm not here to say all of you need to seek knowledge and all of you need to become scholars. I don't believe in that. I think every person has their own way of trying to be the best worshipper of Allah. The ultimate goal is the akhirah. The ultimate way to get there is to be the best abd of Allah, to be the best worshipper of Allah. There isn't one path to get there. I wanted to teach. I wanted to pursue education. Sometimes I see other people say like, oh, I want to pursue education too. And I ask why, and they're like, I don't know, isn't it good to seek knowledge of the deen? Yeah, it's good to seek knowledge, but what's your ultimate objective? Have a plan that goes beyond that. Have a purpose. Don't just memorize Quran to memorize Quran. Memorize Quran because you want to do something with it. Learn Arabic because you want to do something with it. So for me, scholarship was a path. It's not everyone's path. For those that are passionate about it, pursue that. For those that are not, they should seek their activism. They should seek their whatever it is they want to pursue. And whatever it is you're pursuing, having some scholars in that field will provide benefit to that field. It'll keep that field on track. It'll help the fatwa banks that we have and the answers that we need to give be more complete, more comprehensive. And instead of having to constantly seek specialists outside of scholarship, we can have specialists who have the scholarship.
Barakallahu feek. I have one more question before the Q&A. I apologize. I guess I'll start the Q&A. Something that came up multiple times in different classes and different khutbahs that I've given, what is the balance between contentment, al-qana'ah, and ambition? When do you know to keep going, keep pushing, to achieve what you want, what you're ambitious for, and when do you say to yourself, you know what Allah has written for me is what Allah has written for me, let me be content?
Yeah. So ultimately, we've been talking about here I'm saying like people should find their purpose, right? There's a career purpose, then might be a purpose outside of your career. That purpose is connected to some sort of intention. And we've all heard the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that actions are by intentions and we should seek intentions. We should do everything for the sake of Allah. But here's the problem, and this is where Shaykh Abul Hassan Nadwi used to say, the problem with Muslims is not that they have bad intentions. The problem with Muslims is that they have no intentions, okay? And so we need to be working on this idea of developing our intentions. By the way, I preach like intentions should be there for absolutely every action. This is how we get barakah in life too, is you go to sleep, you can get either 8 hours of rest, which is fantastic, or you can say, you know what, Allah, I'm going to make some azkar, and before I go to sleep, I am sleeping so that I can be rested, so I can worship you better. I am sleeping so I can go to work and be an excellent employee and provide for my family and earn halal income. I am sleeping so that I can play games with my kids and help them with their tarbiyah, right? And so intentions should be applied to going to the gym, good intentions. Intentions should be applied to sleeping, all of these different purposes. And if we are, this is thinking of intentions and then tying them all back to doing this for the sake of Allah. So as long as we find ourselves being ambitious, and that ambition is connected to the sincerity, and you can ask yourself, and in your heart right? And so let's say we've achieved a level, whatever level we've achieved, we've got to a certain point in our career, certain amount of wealth, certain amount of education, certain material assets, whatever it might be. We should always be content, because the fundamental principle is we deserve nothing. We do not deserve absolutely anything. And so anything Allah has given us is out of His mercy. And so, okay, we should be content with that. Alhamdulillah, I have food to eat, I should be content. Maybe it's not variety of food, maybe it's not a ton of food, but I have food to eat, I want to be content. But that doesn't prevent us from being ambitious, and we can say, I want more. I want more money so I can do good things with it. Just wanting more money for money's sake, always bad. I want more money because I have specific goals. I want a better career because it'll allow me to role model Muslims better. I want this, I want this, I want that, whatever it is. If we find that we're seeking improvement, if we're seeking growth, and we're seeking to get more, and it's connected back to so that I can please Allah, then we're fine. If we're finding that our ambition is disconnected, and it's for ourselves or for the sake of people, now we know there's a problem with that ambition. And so I think we should be ambitious. I think I've not been as ambitious. I talked about my career. I'm like, I'm happy where I'm at, alhamdulillah. Not been too ambitious on that front. But I think I've been quite ambitious when it comes to things outside of work. And we should continue to be ambitious, because Muslims should be seeking growth, right? We know the hadith of Rasulullah that every day should be better than the previous day. And every day should be, so we should constantly we should not be sitting comfortable. Life is not meant to be comfortable, right? Yeah, we can have some entertainment, some comfort, some of this, but we should be figuring out limited time, akhirah focus, what more can I do?
Barakallahu feek. We'll give one question to the sisters. Sisters, if you have any questions, raise your hands.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Maisha, and I had a question in terms of your Alamiya studies first. Like, what were your most memorable takeaways from as a student, and how has that developed you as in your character, and how has that made you a better professional as well?
Okay. Walaikum salam, by the way. So I was blessed enough to choose Shaykh Akram Nadwi as a teacher, and he is someone who encourages first principles thinking and going back to the original sources. So everything goes back to Quran and Sunnah, and everything is like, think for yourself, like think, use your mind. Don't just take something, but keep asking questions. And I think that's something Actually, I learned from him from a religious perspective and from Elon from a professional perspective, Elon Musk, that always question everything. So I no longer take many things at face value. I just ask a lot of questions. So there's many examples that are along those lines, which are very memorable, that I apply both from personal life to professional life to personal, religious to personal, so on and so forth. In terms of memory, I think there were moments where when you're going through studies, initially, when you're going through something like, hey, I'm going to learn Arabic, it seems like, oh yeah, you could probably learn it in a few months and it'll be easy, and you start with something easy, but then you start getting into really hardcore like Nahu and Sarf, and you're like, oh my God, this is very technical, and this is not so enjoyable anymore. And I remember at the time I was connected to Shaykh Akram, and he taught us about motivation. And what I learned about motivation from him like changed my life, really. Because we always think, and people ask this question every day, is how do you motivate yourself every day? And I say, and now my answer is I don't. I motivate myself about my long-term goals. I want to achieve this in a year. I want to achieve this in 2 years. I want to make a difference to this community. I want to teach this class, or I want to make a difference in this industry. Those long-term goals, those are your motivation. You're doing something, you know why you're doing it, you have a long-term, like, I really want to get this done. On a daily basis, motivation comes and goes. It's very moody. One day you wake up, you're like, I'm going to memorize these verb tables, and the next day you're like, God, these verb tables are boring. And so it's very hard to have the motivation. And so he taught us, he said, waiting for motivation is bad manners. And at the time, like, bad manners, like what it means is like, it's not how a Muslim works. It's not how an ethical person thinks. Oh, let me just sit around and wait for motivation. Let me try and get motivation. So he said, forget about motivation. Force yourself. What you have to do, you know what you have to do, force yourself to do it. I was recently watching a TED Talk that had the same thing about how to be successful. He says, force yourself. It's like, wow, literally the same words. Force yourself to do what you have to do. And there's actually another TED Talk on like how relying on motivation is terrible. But I think that was like a life changer for me, was I used to try and figure out how to use all the techniques to inspire motivation. And I realized motivation is completely optional and unnecessary, and relying upon it is going to make you very unreliable. And I think that was maybe a big learning moment for me.
Barakallahu fiqh. We'll go ahead and break for Adhan and Salatul Isha, and then we'll continue Q&A for a little bit more after Isha, inshallah. Barakallahu fiqh. Allah ones who helped to organize this weekend's program, so Jazakallah khair. The other thing is that tomorrow as well, those of you that are still here in Redmond tomorrow, not able to make it to Seattle, we have a second program here in Redmond. We have our annual fall festival. So there will be activities for children in particular. We will also be making dua for our brothers and sisters in Gaza, and we will have a registration to vote and other activities, inshallah, that is good for the whole family. So that will be here, inshallah. The fall festival, it will be tomorrow, inshallah, from 12 p.m. Barakallahu fikum. Bismillah, inshallah, if we can start taking a seat as people finish their sunnah, then we can start the Q&A, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, we'll go ahead and continue, just so that Shaykh does have to go because he has the program tomorrow, and then he's flying out almost immediately. So, inshallah, we'll go ahead and begin. I think someone already has the mic. There you go, brother. Yes, so please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. I guess you get this question a lot, but what is it like to work for Elon Musk? That's one. And while you're there, have you ever met a situation where something at work or a decision you have to take at work conflicts with our Muslim values? And how did you handle that?
Okay.
Sisters, please take your conversations out. Brothers as well. Please take your conversations out of the musalla. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for your patience. Barakallahu feekum.
This is going to be a public video? Okay, so I worked for Elon for 9 years, alhamdulillah. And throughout that time, we met, I don't know, once a week, once every 2 weeks, like pretty regularly. So I actually worked with him very, very closely. And my son and his sons went to the same school. He started a school, and so I had to see him outside of work as well. My experience with Elon is, number one, like I was curious when I joined the company. No one knew what SpaceX was. No one knew who Elon was when I joined. But I was curious, is he just really smart or really lucky or what? And I definitely learned in my first 4 or 5 weeks on the job, he's brilliant. He's absolute genius. I think on the scale where you measure IQs, he would be in the profoundly gifted category, very high, like IQ of 170 plus is most likely. He can learn anything very fast, remember it. I would go in and have conversations with him where I'm supposed to be the expert of my area, but he would ask me questions where I felt like, oh my God, that's such a good question. I wish I had thought about that. So he was, in the 9 years I worked for him, he was a good teacher, a mentor, someone who got into like coaching mode a lot. A typical conversation would go something like, Elon, we're looking to put forward the system in place, et cetera, et cetera. So like, and And he would say something like, he would look at me and would say, this system is not scalable. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? He goes, when we are flying 100 flights to Mars, this isn't going to, a year, this isn't going to work. This is, you know, now 11 years ago, right? And I'm like, what is this Mars business? Always talking about Mars. But like, he was always thinking about the future. He was always, this isn't going to work at scale. This isn't going to work when we do this. This isn't going to work. And at the time, we used to fly 2 flights a year. 2 flights a year. But he was so right, because right now SpaceX flies every 3 days. It's the only rocket company that flies literally more than 100 times a year, right? Every other company is doing 1 flight every 5 months, 4 months. So absolute brilliance, and he would teach, like he would explain things. Things I already know is like, don't you understand the importance of, you know, speed of light on this thing, and let me explain it to you. And so he was just a really, really good mentor, and he was a genius. Now, for those that have worked with gifted people, you will also know that giftedness comes oftentimes with its baggage. And so in Elon's case, I would say he was at work 98% genius and 2% a child, like that one running around right now, you know, the one who came and said salam to me. So 2% of the time, he would just be acting like a child. You know, he's cracking jokes and just laughing and things. You're like, what's going on? Like, and so that's what my experience. 98% genius, 2% child. What I saw when he used to tweet at that time, we didn't like it when he tweeted because it was weird tweets. It's 98% child and 2% genius. Okay, that's what we saw at that time. So yeah, that's my experience. I respected him a lot, worked with him, learned a lot from him. He's helped me grow a lot. When I left SpaceX was around the same time he bought Twitter. And I don't know if this is like a new Elon or what, because this person that tweets now, I don't know him. I don't understand him. His tweets are clearly anti-Muslim. They're clearly pro-Zionist. The things that he's talking about just don't make any sense to me. So I don't know if something's changed within him, that it was the Twitter acquisition or something, or what happened. I don't like this new Elon. I don't. I respect the one I worked for 9 years, and I think I left at the right time, alhamdulillah. He used to speak against, he tweeted against the Muslim ban when Trump became president. And he would speak about these social issues. And what I can say is, I think deep down inside, he thinks he's doing the right thing. He wants to do the right thing. And he believes in changing the world to do good. I think he's astray in how he's trying to accomplish that. Oh, microphone. I can repeat the question.
Assalamu alaikum. 2 quick observations and a question. It seems to me that today the data shows about 65%, excuse me, of people going to work are distracted, not really interested in what they're doing, and the mobile personal phone at work just accelerates that. Second observation is that everyone brings to their workplace their faith, whether they're Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, whether they're atheists, they bring their faith. But here in the capitalist system of this economy, faith has been removed from the workplace. And you alluded to it yourself, Shaykh Umer, when you mentioned even people lost their jobs because they felt compelled to speak against the current atrocities, and to speak even just in the name of peace, not necessarily in the name of promoting Islam. So my question then is, what guidance can you share with us on what I call spiritual intelligence, and how to reinsert into everyone's workplace, whether it's a C-suite at a major company, the C-suite among entrepreneurs of a startup, how can we bring faith back into the workplace so that people can be more fulfilled and so that productivity can go up, which comes to your earlier point that we must be using our time to excel and be excellent in whatever it is we do. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khair. Excellent question. Something that I actually have learned and grown personally over time, because I came to this country with very much immigrant mentality, and I'm here on a visa. If I do something wrong, or if I say something someone doesn't like, I'm going to get kicked out. And so it's very much, okay, just behave, just do what you have to do, get your studies, get your work done, don't say anything, don't do anything. And even when I got my passport, that, I didn't recognize when I got my citizenship that, life had changed and I've become a citizen and I have different rights. And I still operated with that same mentality, except now I was like, oh, I don't need visas for other countries, So it took time for that to evolve. But I think when I look in the workplace, we oftentimes are publicly not Muslim. Like, we might show up with our beards, but beards are kind of cool nowadays anyway. Everyone's got beards. We're just not very publicly Muslim, because either we have insecurities like I brought with my immigrant mentality, or because we're afraid of some sort of consequences of what happens if we talk about religion. Like, oh no, this is taboo, we can't have this conversation. I realized in my first couple of years, I actually want to have this conversation. So I experimented. Instead of, I would sneak out of a meeting and say, hey, I just need to step out for 5 minutes, I'll be right back to pray. I would, in a 20-person meeting, hey, sorry guys, I just need to step out for 5 minutes to say my prayers. Very vocal, and maybe a couple of people are like, what the heck? But then, people look at you, you go out, you come back in 5 minutes. And always, when you do that, there's someone new to the meeting, you find afterwards someone approaches you and wants to have a conversation. Hey, you pray in the middle of the day? Like, what? Tell me more about that. Why did you have to step out of the meeting? I just got to have lunch with them now to tell them about Islam, right? And there's no way I can start the conversation with a colleague with, do you want to know about Islam? Like, it's not going to, you have to find an excuse. So that was a good excuse. I started in my cubicle just getting up and praying. Like, and the way cubicles are structured, at least at SpaceX, is like very low walls, and so dozens and dozens and dozens of people can see me pray. Again, people see I'm doing these like strange actions, I'm bowing and all of this stuff. So again, people would come ask that question. I think that's the way to do it. The other thing I started like way earlier than that was even just anytime we have a meeting, this is when I got into leadership, I would always emphasize the importance of integrity, ethics. Nope, we can't do that. That would be illegal. That would be going against ethical principles. I am not willing to compromise on ethical principles. And so making those statements, people go like, why is this person always talking about, not the, the corporate speak where you have to have an ethics card with 3 bullet points behind it and you carry it behind your badge, but actually like living it. When those moments come up where someone says, well, so what if we don't honor this part of the contract? No one's going to know. It's like, no, even if people don't know, we have to do the right thing. So that was another one. Very early on, actually from the beginning, I'd say, we should have our principles we don't compromise on, number one. And we all might have a different understanding of fiqh or aqidah and whatever. And so one of those for me very early was, from the beginning, I'm not going to go to a gathering where there's alcohol. And that became another excuse to be the weird one out that starts the conversation. And so there's a dinner. There's going to be, I ask, is there going to be alcohol? Oh, there will? Sorry, I won't be able to join. And people go, but you're a manager in the group. You're not going to join? No, I'm not going to join. It's okay. If you want to have it without alcohol, that's cool. I'll join. But if not, don't worry. Just go without me. And so creating those opportunities, the best kind of da'wah, if you look at the da'wah throughout history, going to malls and setting up tables and passing out pamphlets, I'm not against this, but I'm saying that's something we learned from the Christians. It's something we imported into Islam. The true way of doing da'wah is to role model behavior and people look at you and go, wow, that's different. And so I think we should be unapologetically Muslims at work, especially on these things. Maybe we can't have a candid conversation about Gaza from scratch with, your Jewish colleagues, and I'm not suggesting you do that. I did do that a few months ago. That was fun. But like, I sent an email to the entire company when Ramadan started to explain what Ramadan is in a language that people can understand and appreciate, and with some action items. Hey, this is what Muslims do. This is why they do it. They're trying to grow, and sending all that out. But we should be unapologetically Muslim, because if you look at all the, what are they called, ERGs, employee resource groups at our companies, there's always a Hispanic group, there's always an LGBT group, there's always a Jewish group, but the Muslim ones are generally lacking. Why? So when you go have that conversation with HR and say, I want to start one, they have to say yes. And we should be out there doing this. Absolutely.
I'm going to give the sisters a chance, and then we'll come back. Sisters? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Faiza. I work at Microsoft at executive level. I also have two small kids, 5 and 2-year-olds. So I just have a question for you. All these things that you are pursuing in parallel, your family, jobs, studies, and all other. What do you see from like a woman point of view? What do you think is even more challenging for them because they end up doing a lot more in homes as well with kids? So what would you say them to do differently, or advise them like how they can do all of this if this is what they want to do? Thanks.
There's so many layers to that question. So, subhanAllah, Imam Adam Jamal and I were just talking about this right before the program, that first of all, fundamentally, whether you look at it from an Islamic lens or a biological lens, or I would just say just an objective lens, men and women are different. And to try and make them exactly the same and equal is a pointless, fruitless, unnecessary thing to do. And we have a lot of issues in society now because we don't seem to understand that only women can be mothers. Only they can deliver babies and raise them in a certain way, that Allah's given them capabilities that men don't have. So women have all the capabilities men have and a few more, right? And we don't seem to respect that. We don't respect the role of the mother. And because of that, we run into a lot of issues, because some women, even if they don't want to work, feel like they have to. And they shouldn't feel like they have to. If they want to work, fantastic, no problem. But if they don't want to work, they shouldn't feel like they have to, just to get respected by society and our current standards. It never used to be like this, by the way. Now, the way it used to be also wasn't great, because let's be honest, like in Muslim society, in any society throughout history, except when the prophets came, except when the Prophet ﷺ and other prophets came, and women were respected and they were given their rights and they were treated well, when the prophets left, we did not treat women well, right? And so a lot of issues happened because of that, and then that gave rise to extreme feminist movements and things like that, where women just wanted some of their rights back, and sometimes they went with some extreme with that. Now, so how do we fix this problem? I think number one, we need to respect motherhood, and we need to recognize that, and we need to give women the respect, the time, the space, and meet their needs to be able to properly raise our children, not just for the sake of the women, so we can respect them, for the sake of the children. Otherwise, they're being raised by others, right? And that's not the default that we want in our religion. So I do think the role of a woman is a lot harder in today's society, because you have to deliver the kids, raise the kids. There may be expectations that you have to work, or maybe you want to work, and then you have to help in the household, all of these different things. And so if the woman is going to be participating in, for example, the workforce, then the man should also be participating in helping, right? And these are things that need to be worked out before the marriage, not after. right? And so there was an entire conference that we just had last weekend, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. There was a whole conference, and the entire topic was marriage and divorce and families. And all of these topics of conversation came up. Is a woman allowed to work? When is she allowed to work? When is she not allowed to work? Does she need permission from the husband? All of these scenarios are permissible within Islam as long as we've thought through them, because the two people that are coming together in marriage have to be aligned philosophically. So if that there's a set of defaults that come with Islam. There's a set of defaults. But if you want to differ from the defaults, that philosophical alignment needs to happen. And there's nothing that makes that philosophical alignment impermissible. It's permissible. It's mubah. It's allowed. However, we just need to do a better job of really trying to figure out how we share and manage responsibilities as couples, or what are the different mechanisms for doing so. There's this model, there's this other model, there's this other model, because we've clearly evolved past there's really one model. The man earns, the woman manages the home, and now we've evolved to have multiple models. So how do we support these models and not put a man who's looking for model A with a woman who's looking at model C and put them together, and you're going to have a disaster. All of these, again, I'm not trying to promote a model, I'm not trying to say one is right, one's wrong, but it's a very complex issue. The role of a woman is very hard. Someone actually asked this question of my teacher 2 weeks ago, is how with family responsibilities is a woman supposed to go out and seek education and participate in all these activities like men are able to do? And the reason they asked was, my teacher, Shaykh Nadwi, has written a 43-volume book on the role of 10,000 women scholars throughout history. 10,000 women scholars. Before he wrote the book, people couldn't even have imagined there were 10,000 women scholars. But he dug these up from books, and he said, look, I couldn't look at Turkish sources, Indonesian sources, and African sources. I could only look at Arabic, Persian, and Urdu sources. He found 10,000 scholars. And he said, listen, all of these women, they had family responsibilities, they had children, they were going through marital problems, they were going through societal problems, they were going through issues with in-laws, they were going through divorce, they were going through all of the same problems, but they managed to find time. And his answer was, turn off WhatsApp. I think he can get away with that answer. It's like, turn off the distractions, and you will find some time. I'm struggling with this question because I think the role of a woman in this world is hard, and I don't feel qualified, quite honestly, to answer the question, other than to say, like, I have a lot of empathy, and may Allah make it easy, and may Allah make us have successful women scholars, women who are successful in the workforce, and most importantly, have women who are incredibly successful at being mothers, just like we want our men to be incredibly successful fathers. Like, the role of a mother and the role of a father are absolute essential. Going back to what we talked about earlier, everything else is optional, right? So as long as we focus on the priorities, get the essentials right, Allah will help us with the optional.
Barakallahu feek. Thank you for the question, sister. We're going to go to Brother Haider, and then we'll get one of the young brothers. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, jazakallahu khairan. I am actually asking this question as an activist, and you as a person who is sitting in the Fiqh Council of North America, as well as a scholar in that capacity. I'm, October 7th laid bare the need for activism, particularly political activism. And as you look at the community, I put them in 3 buckets. Majority don't want to do anything with it because of injustice they see, and they feel that there's nothing they can do that will meaningfully change the situation, and so they just choose to withdraw. And we have data to show that even in places where Muslims ran for political office, that the turnout among the Muslims was pathetic, lowest. And the second group, who feel passionate about it, but indulge in a lot of WhatsApp conversations among ourselves and feel good about it. And there's a small group that really tries to do something about it, however small it is. The question to you is that, is there a sufficient emphasis on the need of this ummah, this particularly American Muslim community in the context of what is happening, to focus enough on this issue? And then this issue is, particularly in politics, it's very clear that money and votes are 2 levers that we can play. And what is participation? Money is how do you contribute to further your cause. And in this latter issue, are you thinking about how we can leverage our zakat and sadaqah, which is primarily the primary way we kind of contribute to this, to building that capacity, and how we can bring to bear our assets in this regard?
Jazakallah khair. No doubt this is one of the most important issues of our time, if not the most important issue we're struggling with right now, right? I think Imam Adam Jamal's khutbah was about voting. And I think there's near consensus amongst the scholars that certainly do not vote for the two parties that are both pro-genocide, it seems like. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say that people are divided into different groups. Some people just want to talk about it because they're personally affected, but they're not doing anything serious. Some people are doing something serious, and some people aren't doing anything. Alhamdulillah, I would say since October 7th, and now we're almost coming up on a year, more people have started caring about this issue than ever before. There have been more protests, there's just been more, I mean, the encampments, right? I mean, just looking at all that's happened in the last year, the level of care has gone up. Even people who come from different ethnicities who maybe didn't care that much about Palestinians in the past, it's changed. It is changing. So I have a lot of optimism in that people are bringing about change, people are caring about this issue, people are trying to do what they can about the issue, and it is certainly an obligation upon us to do what we can do. As far as the Fiqh Council, we are definitely looking into what types of money can be used. For example, like if you look at the mechanisms of our time to affect change, there are mechanisms, not necessarily like every Muslim politician is going to be successful, but certainly, for example, lobbying, we know, makes a big difference. And so we're trying, for example, to see what types of funds from sadaqah and zakat, etc., and I think there will be fatwa on this soon enough, inshallah. We've had a few discussions, can be used for example, lobbying or political support or endorsing candidates, things like that. We want to be careful as Muslims. We don't want to be affiliated with a party. Sometimes we get too aligned with one party and then we're with the wrong party all of a sudden, or too aligned to a candidate. But we want to be crystal clear on the issues. And this issue of genocide is the most important issue we could be worried about right now. And so we're trying to find mechanisms on how we get more money into the cause. But just a reminder, I mean, money is not the only way. Like, we need to keep up our daily du'as. It gets tiring after a while, but we can't stop. And even the calls, I mean, my kids are making the calls to the senators and Congress, but like daily basis, just keep calling. And the awareness does make a difference. A lot of people have selfish agendas, motives, agreements, things that they're trying to do that we need to counter. And Allah will not hold us accountable for freeing Palestine. He will not hold any one of us accountable for that. But He will hold us accountable for doing our part, for putting in the effort. So if we're not putting in the effort, that's a big problem. The results are not in our control. This will happen when it happens, inshallah. When Allah decides it will happen. But the effort is something that we have to continue. And we're trying a few different things as a council right now to see what difference we can make, because we realize the difference that can make.
Barakallahu feek. We'll have one of the young brothers, Vancouver brother.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So a lot of us struggle with time management. Do you have like one or two actions we could implement on a daily basis as a part of a routine to get better?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I tend to think less about time management. I'll maybe try and go over some of the things I talked about earlier, but the first is to cut out everything that you can out of your life that you don't need, that's not essential. So that should free up time. Because, see, time can't really be managed. Like every second, 1 second goes by. There's nothing you can do to control that. All you can control is how much can you fit into that time. So you have to cut. You know, in order to invest, we're going to talk about this tomorrow, inshallah, the amount of money that you spend has to be less than the amount of money that you earn. That results in savings, and then you can invest those savings. So if you don't have that, what do you have to do? You either have to increase how much you earn or decrease how much you spend. It's a very simple formula. And so from a time perspective, if you're looking to spend time on something, you have to give it up from somewhere else. It's an opportunity cost. So the most important thing is priority management, to figure out what you will do, where you will spend your time, and where you will not spend your time. That's number one. Number two is where you will spend your time, you need to try and make it the most efficient as possible. That efficiency comes number one from focus. Focus is such a rare commodity when our phones are, alerting us literally every few seconds. And every time it alerts us and we click on a link and we see what's there, we get a dopamine hit. So our minds just get used to this constant dopamine hits, and we can't even focus on something that doesn't give us an immediate dopamine hit. And so we have to actually go on a dopamine diet. We actually have to turn on Do Not Disturb for like a whole day. I spent last trip to Medina, I decided to go a whole week without a smartphone. Wow, that was like my mind just opened up and freed up. It's so different. So number one, cut activities out. Choose what you want to bring in very carefully. Say no a lot. It's going to upset some people, but that's okay. They can be upset. And then be as efficient as possible by having focus. So we know the Prophet ﷺ said, he made dua for the people who are doing work in the early hours of the day. And Allah put barakah in that. So much so barakah. If you look at all the successful people around you, have you noticed, like even the non-Muslims, the successful ones, they wake up at 5 in the morning? The Prophet ﷺ didn't just say, oh, make this a time of barakah for the Muslims. It turns out it's a time of barakah for everybody. So we got to take advantage of those benefits that we know about from the Prophet ﷺ, right? We know that that early morning hours are going to be filled with barakah, and that's the time when no one else is working. You're not getting Slack messages. You're not getting text messages. People are sleeping. That's when you get work done. All the focus work that needs to be done, we get it done at that time. And then, I think every productivity book just talks about the standard techniques, right? I use the Pomodoro method where you work 50 minutes focused, do not disturb, take a break for 10 minutes. Work 50 minutes, take a break for 10 minutes. And learn what works for you. So I realized I can go for 4 hours without a break. I was like, okay, fine, I'll go 4 hours. Like, why do I need a break? This break is for sissies. So I tried that. Worked for 4 hours. Great, got 4 hours of work done. Then what happened? I'm burned out. The rest of the day is gone. So I realized if I do 50 minutes, 10 minutes, 50 minutes, 10 minutes, 50 minutes, 10 minutes, I can do that 8 times in a day. And I don't burn out, alhamdulillah. That works for me. What works for you? Find that. But find the focus. So it's not just about time management. It's about priority management. It's about focus management. Get those right, and the time management is really not the hard part.
Barakallahu feek. We'll have time for 2 more questions. I'm just going to get one of the sisters here, and then Yusuf. Yes. Sister Zaliha, yes. There's a mic coming. The mic is coming.
Assalamu alaikum. Being an IT person and then leaving the technology world, now I work at a nonprofit. I feel the world needs so much help, our help, in every realm, especially, the Uyghur brothers, the people in Palestine, people in Yemen. Forgive me, I don't see the need to have a rocket sent anywhere where our ummah is needing to hear La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah and help them rise above the poverty, the genocide, the destruction that they're in. Again, forgive me, what is the purpose of sending a rocket outside of this world? And why do we put so much energy? By the way, mashallah, with all your successes, I am more than envious of your situation. I just want to understand, why do and people put their energy in this. Thank you.
SubhanAllah, the problems of the world are always there, and they've been there from the beginning of time. And if you look at the Sahaba, or you look at the best of the people in any generation, what you will find is that some of them did one type of profession, and some of them did another type of profession. And so, when we think about the Sahaba, as we know the Prophet ﷺ said they were the best of generations, right? For some reason in our mind, what we're imagining is everyone's memorizing Quran, everyone's studying fiqh, everyone's giving fatwa. And the reality of the situation is, amongst the thousands and thousands and thousands of Sahaba that existed, less than 130 gave fatwa, or 130 some, maybe less than 140. Amongst them, there were less than 10 who would do this frequently. So the number of scholars amongst them was small. If you look at the diversity that we find, this is something that even bothers me when it comes to, for example, we talk about wealth, right? So people ask, is it okay to be rich in Islam? And the reason they ask the question is they say, Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, who was one of the Sahaba, any money he would get, he would give away. And so he was a man of zuhd, man of piety, who just didn't want to get attached to anything material. And we love using the example of Abu Dhar. He didn't care about money, we shouldn't care about money. He didn't have material possessions, we shouldn't have material possessions. Okay, how about Abdurrahman bin Auf? He was by today's standards, a billionaire, right? Multi-billionaire. We can do the math. There's an online article, someone actually did the math. They counted how much money he had. So he was a multi-billionaire. He was one of the 10 promised paradise, right? He was a businessman. That was his job. He wasn't at a non-profit. He wasn't out there, teaching or any of this stuff. His job was business. That's what he did. He went to the market. He was really good at buying and selling things and making a lot of money. And so what we've realized by studying the Sahaba is the diversity that we can find. People who are very focused on acts of worship versus people who are very focused on social justice versus people who are focused on helping feed the poor and the needy. All of us need to do our part, but there were people who had different focuses. People asked Imam Malik, it's like, how come we don't see you in a lot of prayer and reading Quran and all of this? You're Imam Malik, you're like the best Imam we have in Medina. And he said everyone has their own path. His path was to teach. He would teach the people, and he didn't have time for a lot of acts of worship. So there isn't one path that any of us have. If all of us joined non-profits, then Muslims would be missing from the commercial companies. And we need to be there. We need to be everywhere. We need to be in media, we need to be in finance, we need to be in the legal profession, we need to be in politics, and we need to be in nonprofits. And alhamdulillah that we have role models that all of us can see that we can align ourselves behind. I know there are professions I would not enjoy, and alhamdulillah that I don't have to do one of those. I get to choose what I want to do. So that's my general answer. As far as rockets specifically, so every company that I've worked for, every product that this is something that I suggest people do, is you question where you work and what the benefit is of where you work. And if what you're working for doesn't provide any benefit to the world, by the way, this is also a preview to how I share how you should invest money or you start a business. If you're going to invest in a business, you're giving them your dollars for them to grow and scale. So ideally, it should be a business that's benefiting humanity, benefiting Muslims, creating good products and services that are useful, that create jobs, that benefit the economy, and all of this happens. And if we put those additional intentions behind our investment, inshallah, Allah will put barakah in our investment, and we'll get more reward. Whether we get money or not, we get more reward. Intentions are all about getting reward. Things that are, I talked about like intentions for sleeping earlier. If sleep has no reward by default, no reward. All you got to do is make an intention, and 8 hours of sleep became reward. Take these rewards, okay? So I have always had this like method of rationalizing where I work. So I used to work for Broadcom. It was a chip company. Like, what's the benefit of that? Well, Broadcom was in 90% of like cable modems, Ethernet, cell phones, like connecting the world. That was the motto of the company was connecting everything. And I thought, this isn't the case now, but I thought if the world can be connected, and if the people in the US, for example, can see what's really going on in Palestine at the time, for example, then they would have more empathy for that situation. They would see that, and the humanity in them would come out. So the more we connect people through IT, through chips, through the internet, the more beneficial it will be. I don't know if we've exactly seen that, but I have to say that since October 7th, the number of people, if you do a survey of the youth in the country, for example, 18 to 25, 50% of them are pro-Palestine, right? 50% of our youth in America, Muslims, non-Muslims, are pro-Palestine. Why is that? Because they saw some video on Instagram or Twitter or TikTok. So it has actually materialized in some way. I'm, by the way, like quite anti-social media, still trying to figure it out. But I do think it's made quite a positive impact as well. So that's what I thought. When I was working for SpaceX, I could care less about Mars. I don't think we need to protect Earth. Like, the day of judgment will come when the day of judgment will come. I don't really care about Mars. Like, that's never been a passion of mine. But Starlink has permanently changed how internet is delivered across the world to places where there was no internet, or places where there was really poor internet. And that has been a dramatic shift in how things have worked. And the access to space that we've created, and lowering the cost of payload to space, like the dollar per kilogram that you need to spend, if you look at what's going on right now in modern medicine, and the health experiments that are going on in space to help cure diseases on Earth, and how those are enabled by lowering the cost of access to space, there's benefit to it. There's a lot of benefit to it. So I will stand behind that rockets are a useful, beneficial tool for humanity that has opened up a lot of other industries which are beneficial tools to humanity, and I'm there supporting that industry. That's the path that I chose. Is it the most noble of professions? I don't know. Is it a haram profession? No.
After I finish this job, I'm going to go start my own thing, right? That's something that I've personally obviously gotten advice a lot. That's like almost the first thing. And like after a doctor, engineer, that's what their parents want their kid to be. You know, go be your own business owner, right? After you've already gotten that. But I kind of like grappling with that is like not everyone can be a business owner naturally. So like is partially the question is like part of it is like you tell everybody to do it and a few people succeed, and alhamdulillah, that's a good thing. And like kind of the primary question is kind of individually and more importantly as an ummah, like how do we progress on that issue?
Yeah, I think that's correct that not everyone, you know, back in the day, again, looking back through history, everyone was a businessman. Like the jobs were very few. And the jobs are not like W-2 jobs, they were more like 1099. So you would hire someone as a contractor, as a consultant, and in Islam you would have like mudaraba, and you would hire someone and say, hey, do this one thing for me. Even the murabaha contract was not a financing contract. The murabaha contract itself was, hey, Imam Adam bought a laptop from the market, and I don't know how to buy laptops, and you already bought one, can I just buy it off of you? Right, that's what the contract was, and I'll pay you what you got plus a bit more. So a lot of the Islamic financial contracts, you can see the type of business that the Sahaba were engaged in, or that generation, Muslims, non-Muslims, they were all engaged in. So business was the default. Everyone had their own business, and there weren't large corporations, obviously. Over time, the Industrial Revolution changed that, right? And now we've got these massive, I think Amazon has 1.5 million people now. I just can't even fathom that. Just still struggling with that concept. I think a lot more people have the ability to do business than the people themselves think. And what happens is, and this is what's happened to me, is you enter the corporate world and it just becomes very comfortable. And you do it and you're like, yeah, maybe someday I'll get out of it. Yeah, one day I will, and then you just don't. And you keep going on that path. And then it just, too much time goes by and it just feels way too comfortable. So that's the situation I feel like I enjoy my job, but like I'm not going to leave it on my own. And so I dream that someday they may like get rid of me somehow. and then I can go and pursue something because it's like, yes, here's my chance. Because literally, I've moved from job to job, but I've never applied for a job. Like, alhamdulillah, I've never applied for one because like somebody I knew said, hey, come work here. And I went interviewed, and said, somebody else said, come work here. And so this like cycle keeps continuing, and I'm like, yeah, it'd be good to try something else. I think a lot more people can do it, and people should try harder. And I think the right time to try is when you're younger. And the problem is we've built this pipeline of this. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but what's going against this is get good grades in high school, do well in college, become a software engineer, Shaykh was saying, and then go work at Amazon and Microsoft and Apple and whoever, Boeing. And so we've built this pipeline. You go from step A to step B, B to C, C to D, and very few people consider going outside of that. And really, that's the time. The time is when you're younger. Try different things out, see if you can succeed. And business is a lot about experimentation, right? You got to try one thing. If you look at startups, if you study startups, they always start off with an idea or of a product or a service, and within a few months they go, yeah, that's not going to work, and they pivot. And then a few months later, they pivot again. And an average startup pivots multiple times. And somebody needs to do that. But the time to do it is when you don't have kids, when you don't have a wife, you don't have all of this to deal, you don't have a husband, etc. Like, that's the time to do the startup. And I feel like I've like grown up past that, and now I'm like, I should do a startup. I don't know. It feels uncomfortable. So don't get into my situation. Like, do it a lot earlier. Try it. Maybe it's not for you, but try it, and then you still have options if it doesn't work. Yeah, so one way to work it is to actually set a deadline for yourself and say, what I want to do. Like, this is advice, going back to the women question. One of the pieces of advice I give to like my daughters is, number one, like get a major in which you're going to be able to do a major in which you will get a job. It's like, oh, but I want to be a homemaker. Like, one of my daughters told me that. I want to be a homemaker. I said, okay, fine, but you're living in America, and let's say you get married, you go through divorce, your husband gets disabled, he dies, something happens. There's a lot of options that we don't want to talk about, but those are real. And who's going to support you? You need to be able to work. So get a job, right? But for women who don't want to work like their whole life, I recommend careers where you can pause them, right? So, for example, go become a dentist, right? And then if you took 3 years off and you come back to the profession, it's okay. You take 5 years off, 10 years off, you can still come back. Software engineering is a bit hard. You give it up for 5, 7 years, it's hard getting back into it. So choose a profession that maps, and that could be also a path for those that want to seek businesses. Maybe go get 2, 3, 4 years of experience, but set a due date for yourself. I'm going to leave at this time, and then I'm going to go start my own business. The problem is people like me, I did set a due date for myself. I said I was going to work in the corporate world for 3 years, and then I was going to start my own business. And I didn't, because it was too comfortable. So the risk is you set the due date, it's just going to still stay too comfortable, and you say forget it. That's the risk. The other risk is if you don't get some experience, it's hard to find a job later. So you have to balance between the two risks. I always say every risk has another risk opposite of it, and so you have to balance between two risks. There's never just one risk. You're always balancing two things.
Barakallahu feekum. Barakallahu feek, Shaykh. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your thoughts and wisdom with the community, and thank you all for attending and for joining us, inshallah. Next Friday, we have our Understand Quranic Arabic free class. There's a class here in Redmond, and for all of our Seattle brothers that are visiting, there's going to be a class in Seattle as well. So we will have two different classes, inshallah. It'll be on Friday, and who knows, maybe 8 years from now you will be a mufti, just like Shaykh Umer. But it starts with Arabic, so we'll be doing that, inshallah, next Friday, 7 o'clock after Maghrib Salah. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.